Guardians of the Galaxy, the Star Wars of my generation. So I think it's safe to say that for the longest time, Marvel's always had the reputation of being underdogs, considering the fact that in the 90s they had to sell off most of their profitable brand superheroes in order to stave off bankruptcy. But when the MCU began, it showed that Marvel was the powerhouse that they were, showing that some of these more B-list superheroes could actually be pretty profitable and cool. A lot of people began to question why, after 3, for the most part, very moderately successful sequels in the beginning of Phase 2, rather than getting to the next Avengers movie, why they were going to put out a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy, a B-list space adventuring team comprised of people that nobody had ever heard of, including such crazy characters like a talking raccoon and a talking tree. But keeping in mind also that this was in the middle of Phase 2, which is when they were getting into their very experimental phase of getting these smaller, lesser-known directors who had not had that much blockbuster filmmaking and putting them at the helms of these giant blockbuster films. It didn't necessarily work for them so well with the first 2 movies, but needless to say that after the Russos, they made the very smart decision of bringing in James Gunn to handle this team. And in August of 2014, Guardians of the Galaxy went from being that B-list team that nobody had ever heard of to arguably being the most popular and best micro-franchise within the greater MCU. Yeah, this was a movie where absolutely everything could have gone wrong. I mean, Marvel had really been known for making risky plays at that time, but this was arguably their riskiest play that they had done, and it paid off in the biggest and best of ways. The highest grossing domestic movie of 2014, the #1 blockbuster of the summer. But yeah, it was always one of those situations where it's like, wow, so 2 CG characters, voiced by 2 big name celebrities, a wrestler who, at that point, wrestlers were still not known for their acting ability. Zoe Saldana, she'd done a couple of movies, but I think for the most part, people still only knew her as the chick from Avatar, so they weren't necessarily sold on her on her acting chops. But of course, the biggest one that all people talked about, Andy from Parks and Rec as basically a new version of Han Solo. Even still looking back, it absolutely amazes me just how good this movie is. The jokes, the camaraderie, and just the balls that it has to really embrace this crazy kooky material. Like, this wasn't like any of the previous Marvel movies, which for the most part had been grounded. Even something like Thor had been pretty grounded. But this was full on going with cosmic kooky craziness, space language, wacko aliens, lasers, space fights. It really was like bringing Star Wars into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And let me tell you something, that people may have been concerned for the casting, but once they saw these 5 anti-heroes together, and these guys really are anti-heroes. Oh man, it's the best team to me within the MCU. Because while it took 6 movies for us to get the 6 Avengers together, we got the Guardians in 1 movie. I think the thing that Gunn understood about each and every single one of these characters, and why he was able to make them so relatable and just make this movie feel so more humane than really any other MCU at this point, is because he understands how to translate the trauma of the human experience through any voyeur. And he knows how to mask that with humor, but he also knows how to get some of the most tragic and emotionally gut-wrenching moments out of that. Like, I talked in my Guardians 2 clip about how damaged each and every one of these characters are. But when your first shot of your movie is a little kid literally losing his mom to cancer and then getting abducted by space pirates like 3 seconds later, having those 2 scenes be in the same movie and yet somehow translate to having like one of the best character arcs overall. Again, I talked a lot about why I like this movie more than 2, and I think at the end of the day, it still comes down to the fact that by the time Volume 2 came out, at the very least, these characters were established. And it took them in all new sorts of directions, but at the very least, 1 was a tremendous risk, and it absolutely paid off. And in a way, kind of that sort of daring, that punk rock edge that Gunn took is to me what really sells this and really helps to elevate this movie above a lot of the other Marvel movies. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one of this movie's selling points, the soundtrack, because Gunn took a lot of great cues from Edgar Wright and modeled this movie around its soundtrack, and it works completely. Like, this was the movie that was able to take a ton of great underrated hits from the 70s and the Motown era and put them on like Spotify's like top playlist at the time. Oh, this movie's so good. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Avengers Infinity War. This was it. This was finally the movie. After years upon years, after movie after movie after movie, we were finally gonna get Thanos, the ultimate big bad that had been hyped up and built up for so many years that it almost became a little bit unbelievable that he was actually gonna do as much damage as they said he was going to. But then those trailers came out, and you heard Josh Brolin's smooth, silky voice as the giant Mad Titan. And oh man, do they deliver on every single step of the way. To me, if Guardians of the Galaxy is the true Star Wars of the MCU, then this is without a doubt The Empire Strikes Back. Literally to the point where Anthony and Joe Russo specifically said that they pulled the most from Empire Strikes Back when it came to writing this movie. I know a lot of people hold Endgame higher because it's the grand finale that the MCU deserved, and it absolutely does deserve all the accolades that it gets. But if you want to talk about an absolutely grand scale movie, to me, the true movie that delivered upon years and years of payoff and build-up, the movie that had the characters and the highest stakes that they've ever been in, finally delivering on the MCU's best villain ever, not to mention the fact that this is also the first movie where the MCU had the villain as the main character, because this is without a doubt Thanos' movie, just having all of those balancing acts, and the Russos were finally able to put their chess-like abilities in order to move characters from one spot to another in just the right way that serves both the characters and the story, then look no further than this movie. It's absolutely ridiculous to me, because in the movie that has Iron Man and the Guardians of the Galaxy, who at that point were pretty much Marvel's most well-liked characters, and have them almost take a backseat to the villain and have him be arguably, in my mind, Marvel's most interesting character that they've ever put forth. Again, all of those things cobbled together still to me don't do the justice that this movie deserves. Because the thing is that I've probably seen this movie more than any other Marvel movie. And of all the little problems that I do have, and there are a few problems that I still do have with this movie, the thing that I keep coming back to is, wow, how the hell did they pull off Thanos? Because everything in this movie is tied to him. And it really does come through the power of this screenplay and this ensemble, the fact that they are able to have this many characters and this many settings and have them all cohesively flow and make sense because they are all tied back to the actions of this one character. To me, it's a much better ensemble than Avengers Endgame because it has so many more people that it has to deal with. And for a 2.5 hour long movie, this movie flows better than most other Marvel movies. The action is super intense. The amount of settings that they go to is crazy. The character interactions and bouncing back and forth is amazingly well done. And just if you want to talk about how to properly structure a movie, then look no further. It's so crazy because, again, the problem is that you really can't watch this movie without having seen any of the other Marvel movies. But in terms of being the absolute grand payoff to having sat through all of these movies beforehand, I really do think I have a problem because Thanos is literally might be my favorite Marvel character. Because there is not a single moment in this movie where this guy has to raise his voice and yell, and he is constantly reminding you in every single frame that he is on screen that he is the one that is in control. And again, the fact that Marvel was able to pull off the darkest ending that they've ever been able to pull off and still keep their audience members invested for the next movie, that really comes down to the strength of this character. Like, he was able to be both empathetic and terrifying, flipping from one note to another with almost no difficulty at all. And also, on top of all that, it's a CG motion capture performance. Yeah, this to me is absolutely the best that Marvel has ever done. It's their biggest, it's their grandest, it's their ultimate payoff. It is their Empire Strikes Back. It's my #1 favorite Marvel movie, Avengers Infinity War. 4.5 out of 5 stars. And that is it. That is officially all 22 movies within the Infinity Saga rank. Thank you guys so much for being here and coming along and following my multi-step Marvel journey. What did you guys think? How do you guys like my rankings? Make sure you leave them in the comments section below. Be sure to click the like, click the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, that way you get notified every time we have a new video. And once again, just thanks for being here. I'll see you guys next time, and of course, watch more fucking movies.